Hey, Econ students. We are going to do the last part of inflation. So this is 2.3, part 2, inflation. And we're going to start with the 3 causes of inflation. Number 1 is when the government prints too much money. So governments that keep printing money to pay debts end up with hyperinflation. The result, banks refuse to lend because the price of things are going to be higher tomorrow. So investment falls, and remember, investment is business spending. That goes down, and people don't save up to buy things because they know tomorrow things are going to cost double. So examples of this happening are Bolivia, Peru, Brazil, Germany between World War I and World War II, and also Zimbabwe. So the reason why this happens, economists have come up with a theory. They call it the quantity theory of money. It's like a model to explain why when you print money, it causes super high inflation. So the velocity of money is the average times a dollar bill is spent and respent in a year. So the actual cash is floating around throughout the year, and the velocity is how many times that actual bill has been used that year. So quantity theory of money equation is M, which is money supply, times V, which is velocity, equals price level times Y, the quantity of output. Notice that P and Y together, the price level plus the quantity of things that have been produced, is nominal GDP. So just keep that in your head. So if we put this to practice, M times V equals P times Y. So why does printing money lead to inflation? Assume that velocity is related to is relatively constant because people's spending habits are not quick to change. So the amount of money that's being spent, or the dollar bills that are being spent every year, is about the same normally because people's spending habits are about the same. Also assume that output, which we call Y, is not affected by the amount of money that's put into the system because it's based on production. Doesn't matter how many bills have been printed, people are going to produce what they produce. They're not related. If the government increases the amount of money, if they print off lots of dollars, what will happen to prices P? So assume the money supply is $5. It's really small, but let's pretend it's $5, and it's being used to buy 10 products with a price of $2 each. So question is, how much is the velocity of money? So we use the formula M times V equals P times X. $5 is the money supply times the velocity equals 2, the price, times 10, the products. So 5V equals 20, so the velocity of money is 4. Okay? And remember, we assume that the velocity is going to stay relatively the same. So if the velocity and the output stay the same, what will happen what will happen if the amount of money is increased to $10? So we do the formula over again and put in what we know. $10, from 5 we change it to 10, times the velocity we figured out 4, equals P times the same amount of products, 10. Figured out 40 equals 10P, so P is 4. So the price was 2, now it's 4. Notice that when you double the money supply, the price is double. So this formula is just used to explain why reason number 1 for inflation, the government printing money, works. Why it happens. All right. The other 2 causes of inflation. So number 1 reason why inflation happens, the government prints money. Number 2 is demand pull inflation. And all that means is that when demand rises, that pulls the prices up. There's too many dollars chasing too few goods. An overheated economy will cause excessive spending, but there's the same amount of goods out there, so prices are going to drive up. So this right here is a graph showing the supply and demand of everything in the economy. We call it aggregate supply and aggregate demand, and if we increase demand, prices are going to go up. And then the third reason is cost push inflation. Higher production costs increase prices. So if it costs more to make shoes or it costs more to make computers, whatever it is, if oil is more expensive, that's going to push the supply backwards because it costs more to produce it, which also raises the prices. So a negative supply shock increases the cost of production and forces producers to increase prices. So 3 causes of inflation. 1, the government prints too much money. Demand pulls inflation up. or costs pushes inflation up. All right, so we also need to talk about interest rates and inflation. Interest rates are fees that people pay to borrow money. So real interest rates are the percentage increase in purchasing power that a borrower pays. So again, it's that fee, the percent of whatever they're borrowing that the borrower pays, and it's adjusted for inflation, real interest rates. The formula for that is the real rate, the real interest rate equals the nominal rate minus the expected inflation rate. Nominal interest rates are the percentage increase in money that a borrower pays, not adjusted for inflation. So it's that amount of money that they pay for borrowing the money. It's the percent of what they borrowed, but it's not adjusted for inflation. So real, adjusted for inflation, nominal, not adjusted for inflation, and this is the formula to figure it out. And you can use this for any kind of rate, whether it's interest rates, wage rates, inflation rates, any rate you're given. If you have the nominal and the expected inflation rate, you can figure out the real rate. And by rate, I mean percentages. So here's an example of it happening. If you lend out $100 with a 20% interest rate, inflation is 15%. A year later, you get paid back $120. So you use that to figure out what the nominal rate is and what the real interest rate is. So the nominal rate was the original rate, it says 20% interest. The real rate is that 20% interest rate minus the 15% inflation rate that's happening. 20 minus 15 is 5. So your nominal rate is 20% and your real rate is 5%. In reality, if you lend out $100, you're getting paid back an amount with less purchasing power. Okay? You get back the 120, but really you're getting back like 105. The other example is down here. Let's say you lend out 100 with a 10% interest rate. Prices are expected to increase by 20%. In a year, you get paid back $110. So let's figure out what you really got back. So your nominal interest rate is 10%. Your real rate is that 10% minus the inflation expectation. So 10 minus 20. So your real interest rate is negative 10%. So you get back 110, but in real dollars, you're really getting back $90. You're getting paid with less money with less purchasing power. So we've gone over all three goals. The three economic goals were to grow the economy, limit inflation, and limit unemployment. So the government's role is to manage all three of those well. If they focus just on unemployment, inflation is going to go up. If they focus just on inflation, unemployment will go up. They need to focus on all of them together. So these are the numbers that we use to kind of see what's good, bad, and what we should worry about. So for unemployment, a good number is 6% or less. We actually want it to be between 6 and 4%. We start to worry when unemployment numbers go up to 6.5 to 8%. And if it's over 8.5, the unemployment rate, that's bad. For example, in 2010-ish, after the Great Recession or during the Great Recession, I believe the number got up to 10%, and that's why we called it a Great Recession. For inflation-wise, we want the inflation rate, the prices going up, to be between 1 and 4%. So that's good. If it's between 5 and 8, we start to worry. And if it's 9% or more, that's bad. It's going too fast, things are going to go wrong. And then with GDP growth, remember we want to grow the economy. We, for the United States, want to be in between 2.5 and 5% growth. We can handle that, that's good. If it's between 1 and 2%, we're growing, but we're growing very slowly, then we start to worry. Or if we're not growing at all, 0.5% or less, that's really bad and that's not a good sign. So the economy kind of looks at this and tries to fit everybody in these blue numbers: unemployment, inflation, and growth. All right.